I don't know if you consider it.
Yeah, I should have been here. I'm not an agent. But my name is Kurpinski. I have a PhD in bioengineering from UC Berkeley. Terry and I have been working together since about 2005 or so. We did this last year, and this is really just an opportunity for us to come in and kind of make fun of the things that we see in movies that aren't quite right. We're calling this real science in science fiction, but to be a little more specific, this is mostly about biotech in science fiction, specifically because that's what we know about. Terry told me yesterday when we were practicing this is because we're going to leave the rest up to the physicists.
Yeah. So we are happy. We're going to have a short presentation, and we're happy to take questions. And any questions outside of biotech, we're happy to answer incorrectly.
How long before we can upload our brains into cybernetic bodies? That's my question.
Oh, it is about to be answered.
Wait about 5 minutes into the presentation. And just a little plug for the two of us. Another reason that we were here is because we wrote a book. So it's a little quirky, fun book on sort of a satirical look at cloning in biotechnology and how you would defeat your own clone if you had one.
For the comic fans, the interior art and the cover is by Ming Doyle. I don't know how many people recognize her name. Excellent artist.
So again, sort of what we were thinking about when we did this presentation to put this together was just thinking about what common ideas there are about biotechnology in cinema and in pop culture, and where they get it right and where they get it wrong. And a big motivation for writing the book, the cloning book, was that people don't really seem to know what clones are half the time, especially in movies, and what they're really all about. And a big misconception is, of course, that clones are completely identical. You know, usually when you see clones in movies, they look exactly the same, they act really similarly. So one question is, if we had clones in real life, biological clones, would they be completely identical? And we don't have human clones right now for many reasons, but we do have animal clones. And one example is this adult dog and her clone. And you can see obviously they're not completely identical. The main reason for that is simply because when you make a biological clone, you start from scratch. So you have to start from an embryo and let it grow. So unless they're both growing at the same time, they're not going to end up looking exactly the same. But the closest thing that we do have in reality are identical twins. So you can say, well, even things that are biologically, genetically identical, they don't always end up exactly the same. So this is a pair of genetically identical twins, but one of them is heterosexual and the other one is homosexual. So there's a lot of things in nurture versus nature that can deviate, and you end up with two organisms that are genetically the same, but these guys don't even really look that much like identical twins. Something that's kind of interesting is that when you start really looking at identical twins, you can find a lot of differences like this. So in this picture, this is fingerprints from two identical twins that they look pretty similar, just in a general sense, but if you look really closely at the individual swirls, you can see that they're not the same. So that has a lot to do just simply with the way that organisms develop, and if you were going to clone yourself, your clone would not share your fingerprints. So the way that it's portrayed in movies, clones walking around and maybe going through a retinal scanner and it identifies it as the original person, that's not necessarily true. Your fingerprints wouldn't be the same, the eyes wouldn't be exactly the same, and in fact, they now have facial recognition technology that can actually tell the difference between two identical twins. Wow. So even if you were going to clone yourself, it's not exactly like it would be how Hollywood portrays it. Another good example is that a lot of things happen differently, even in the fetal environment. So here's two identical twins where one twin was receiving the vast majority of the blood supply from the mother, and the one on the right wasn't getting nearly enough. So even before they were born, they start developing differently. They're obviously not going to look the same. And this is something that every once in a while, Hollywood does get it right. So another thing that kind of goes along with that is that clones, we think they're going to look exactly the same. sometimes people think they're going to act exactly the same, or they're going to have the exact same memories as the original. And a big misconception there is that the memory is genetic. You know, we're housing our memories in our DNA. And we have a little clip from one of my favorite movies, The Fifth Element.
This is a normal human DNA chain, okay? You, me, anybody, right? Watch this. Compositional elements of his DNA chain are the same as ours. There's simply more of them, tightly packed with infinite genetic knowledge, almost like this being was engineered. Even if they didn't try, no, they put it through the cellular hygiene detector. The cell is, for lack of a better word, perfect.
So, in that movie, probably a lot of you have seen that one, they basically rebuild an entire organism from her hand. And for whatever reason, she remembers everything that she remembered before. So even if this technology was possible, you're not going to remember everything from your severed hand, right? You're not storing your memories inside your fingers. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And we said, okay, well, maybe we'll give them the benefit of the doubt because obviously she has perfect DNA. We take a little bit of an issue with that.
What is that?
If you look at a normal DNA chain that has those two swirls, they're saying the composition is exactly the same. That's basically physically impossible. The chain would essentially blow itself apart from steric hindrance of the molecule. So there's a lot of things going wrong in that clip, but I do love the movie. But the big thing is, you know, there is this misconception that clones would remember everything that you remembered. And it doesn't make a lot of sense. You know, this is the misconception. DNA equals memories, and that's simply not true. If you start from DNA, you're going to start from a baby. The baby's not going to know everything that you know. So the question is this possible with some sort of bioengineering, not going from DNA to memory, but can we either transfer the brain to a new organism, or at least transfer sort of the imprint of what the brain is thinking into another organism? And there's a lot of this in science fiction. A good example is Avatar.
They want 99%, they can pay them. Are you feeling, Jake?
I really hope that if I ever have an opportunity to run another body like that, when they start it up, I see myself going through the neurons.
So that seems a little unlikely. Actually, I should mention that before we jump into this, in Avatar, I hope I'm not ruining this for anybody, but when they're doing it, you know, in the lab there, I'm assuming they're using some sort of brain-machine interface. They've got a lot of computers running. Then, of course, later in the movie, James Cameron wants us to believe that a tree will allow us to achieve that interface, which seems a little unlikely. I guess, you know, for those of us not living on Pandora, we're probably better off with something like this. And this is sort of state-of-the-art technology in terms of what might be possible for how we can control something else with our thoughts, or potentially someday, you know, maybe have some sort of transference of consciousness, at least sort of project our consciousness onto something else. So using machines and the electrical signals in our brains and nerves, there's good examples of people being able to control robotic arms. So in this case, we have two people that have had amputated limbs, and by integrating sort of a bionic arm with the existing nerves, these people can learn how to control these appendages. And actually,
The nerves are rerouted to the right here by the shoulder, and there's a rig on the shoulder that interprets signals from there, so you think about moving an arm and you're able to move an artificial arm. And they've worked quite well in a couple of trials. So this is a technology that's being pursued in many different directions.
And, you know, obviously, to actually start using thoughts to manipulate different objects or different control interfaces, the closer you get to the spine or the brain, the more control you're going to be able to allow. This is a photograph of a paraplegic who has, you can see the electrodes implanted into the top of his skull. He can actually use this to interface with the computer and basically move a cursor around the screen with his mind. He can also control an external robotic arm, sort of in the same way that the people with the attached robotic arm are doing. And, you know, for the majority of us, we're not using this because we're not disabled, but there's a lot of people looking into technologies for everybody to use this in everyday life. So one of the most interesting things that I've seen lately is basically an EEG that you stick on your head. So it's a lot less invasive than having something implanted. But you can use this little helmet device to, they basically are starting to play video games with this. And that's probably the easiest way to market something like that, but eventually there's a lot of applications for this. You can wear this helmet and basically teach the video game to rotate a cube. So if you think about this cube on a screen rotating clockwise, it will rotate that way. And then you can do all these different manipulations with it, push it, pull it, rotate it in several directions. So this is sort of, at least for now, state of the art, and we hope that eventually it will get us to this.
Kyle and I either have done or are doing martial arts, and it took a lot longer.
10 hours is pretty short.
So when people think about biotechnology, one of the favorites is always superhumans. There are some interesting opportunities, not for the near future certainly, but for the far future. And if you want scientific accuracy, I decided you immediately want to go toward the movie Doom.
You got 24 pairs of chromosomes.
Humans only have 23.
But what is the extra pair?
Makes her superhuman. The extra pair makes her super strong, super fit, super intelligent. Her cells divide 50 times faster, meaning she heals almost instantly. Fossil record indicate these people have conquered disease. We found no genetic disorders, no viruses, no cancers.
So what, they were just naturally superior?
No, not naturally. See, the earliest remains we found only had 23. We suspect this extra chromosome may be synthetic.
Bioengineering.
It's a long word for marine.
So this is actually a very fun application because, first off, there are the potential for considering genes or changes in genes that can have obvious physical differences. One that's been in the press in the last couple of years are myostatin mutations. Myostatin is basically a protein that shuts down muscle growth. It's a control on muscle growth. And if you have a mouse with a mutation that sort of shuts that control down, you're obviously fairly muscular. You get that also in dogs. That's a bully whippet. It's actually a very sweet-tempered dog, but it's called a bully whippet because if it wanted to, it could be a good bully. Double muscle cattle. Fish, and even human beings, a few naturally occurring myostatin mutations that have led to distinct differences in the musculature of the person possessing them. One of these kids had obvious muscles practically as an infant, and his mom had one myostatin mutation, and she was a champion long-distance runner. So there's the possibility of finding genes, and certainly won't be easy, but the possibility of finding genes that will allow us to have physical abilities that are far above what today's norm is.
Did you say that means a whippet?
Yeah.
Yep, bully whippet. And when it comes to artificial chromosomes, that's actually something that's been researched for a long time. There are artificial chromosomes that are used in bacteria and yeast fairly commonly, and there is work in